Could you please raise your hand?
One of the greatest qualities of man, of humanity, is the ability to find peace, to find integrity, to find enlightenment, to find everything great about humanity in some of the worst times.
Do you allege that Steve has ever committed child abuse with y'all's children?
And something that is even more amazing about humanity, about man, about what we have within us, is the ability to take when tragedy happens, when dark things happen, really, really bad stuff happens to us, to take it within ourselves, to absorb it, to get to know it.
Well, he played no role in their life, in their well-being.
To shed light to all the little places that it finds inside of us and transform it into something beautiful.
Because why would someone hurt a kid if they knew it would cause trauma?
And so that's what this story is about. This is a story about how some of the worst betrayal, some of the worst deception that happens in a divorce, in a custody battle, and all these different things, and how we turn that into being a good man, how we turn that into being a good father, and how we turn that into doing what is best for our family. And that's what this series of videos is about.
That wouldn't be a very good parent, would it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not that parent.
So it's your opinion that it's not traumatizing to a child to hit them and yell at them.
See, when it comes to divorce and custody, oftentimes the deception that women put into it is going to involve a lot of gaslighting and a lot of lying, a lot of betrayal, and almost betrayal in the sense that it's justified by our society and culture. Sometimes it's the kind of betrayal that it almost gets overlooked at, or that it's something that it's allowed to be done. Well, a woman's crazy or in a bad spot.
Do you ever hit the kids with an object?
With the object,
What did you hit them with?
the chancla.
And do you realize that if I were to hit our court reporter with a slipper today, that I would go to jail for assault?
So this is a video that's a part of a series where we're going to talk about almost everything you can imagine when it comes down to divorce and custody from a men's perspective.
You don't know how relevant it is using illegal drugs. You don't know. And you don't know whether you're traumatizing these children when you hit and yell at them, do you?
And in this video, we're going to talk a lot about the pain around deception, gaslighting, all these horrible things that both men and women do to each other, but women do in a very unique way towards men.
Is neglect a form of child abuse?
So he committed child abuse by not playing a role in their lives?
By neglecting them, by being absent at home.
And that's child abuse?
Neglect is child abuse.
Were you neglecting them whenever you chose to go use drugs while they were in the home?
So we're going to talk a lot about the PTSD, the trauma, the panic, the fear that you might have as a man, and how you have to manage that, or else it can absolutely 100% destroy your custody case. You're going to hear a lot about my story. You're going to hear about how I was falsely accused of abusing my kids. You're going to hear about the intent for that, had a lot of gaslighting, and with the specific idea to basically ruin my life and put me in prison.
He offers no role of leadership, no role of order.
How it came from somebody that I loved, how I dealt with that pain, and how after 8 weeks of her making those claims, I had the roles reversed legally, on paper, under oath.
Why? Because he doesn't hit them like you do?
No, because he doesn't discipline them at all. He just lets them run wild. You think that's a good dad?
Well, I'm not so sure about the yelling and the hitting of the kids and smoking marijuana and being intoxicated around the kids, driving while intoxicated, putting other people's lives at risk. I don't know if that's a good mother. What do you think?
This is the same type of legal power that I want you to get, but in addition to that, and what I want to break down in this series of videos, is how you can get into the mental, emotional, and lifestyle empowerment of self, so that not only you can live a great life, but you can be a great father. And so in this video, we are talking about a lot of the trauma, a lot of the panic, a lot of the betrayal, a lot of the stuff inspired by gaslighting, which happens so much by females in this situation, of how we can manage that as men so we can build up a court case if we need to, but most importantly, how we can be great fathers in the long run. So a couple years ago, my ex and I split up, and when we split up, she did what so many women do these days, is she panicked, she freaked out, she felt her back was against the wall and didn't want to perhaps accept responsibility for some of the things that had happened. And in that, she decided to make false child abuse claims against me. And it's sad to say that in our society and culture, what she did is done by so many women when they go through this process. She had done some things to sabotage that relationship, and when it became too overwhelming for her, she rebelled, swung back the other way, and did what so many women do. What is uncommon about this case is the situation itself as well as the result. See, what made this so problematic was not only losing this amazing relationship with the woman that I loved, but also I had a child abuse charge from the past. And in fact, one of the silver linings to this whole story is because of this case, because of the false claims that my ex made with me a couple of years ago, that old charge from 10 years ago actually was amended. That's a really, really beautiful story. And see, that makes the situation a little bit different because I already had an injury to a child charge that my ex planned to use against me, that she plotted and mapped out how she was going to use it to defend herself and put me in jail or ruin my life. And I believe her exact words were, "If you challenge me in any way, you're going to be fucked, and I'm going to make sure you are fucked for the rest of your life." But the situation is even more different because also I didn't do what most men do. See, what I hear about all the time in the men's advice spectrum, the manosphere, the men's development industry, is we hear about how bad women are in this situation, and women are bad in this situation. But what we don't hear about is how men overreact, how men do the same reactive stuff, a little bit different in their own masculine way, to continue to sabotage themselves and their children in a court, custody, divorce, separation situation like mine. And the result of it all is extremely different because within 8 weeks of her making that claim, while going through some of the toughest mental and spiritual and whatever you call it challenges of my life, 8 weeks from the time she started making those claims, I had the opportunity to get full custody of my kids. I had the opportunity to put a protective order against her. I had the opportunity to press separate charges against her. And legally, in almost every possible way that you could imagine, I had the most power in a situation. And for somebody that had already had a charge of child abuse and a woman in the United States court system, in the court system of Travis County, which is where Austin, Texas is, I was able to totally dismantle her claims and get what most men don't even get the opportunity to get when they don't have as much adversity as me. I love being a father. I love everything that that entails. I loved being a family man. I loved my relationship with my ex. It was one of the most important things that I had ever done in my life. And in so many ways, she's a great woman. She just made some tragic, tragic mistakes. And part of the reason why I'm making this video is because I believe in fatherhood. I believe that fathers and men can be great in these trying situations. And so this video is the first part of my story, the first part of a series which I've spent a long time trying to figure out how I was going to make it. A lot of times I didn't know if I was going to make it. It shares a lot of personal stuff about my ex, about myself, about my family. I'm a big proponent that in any way we attack or harm the other party or hurt them in any way, and there's kids involved, that is a form of child abuse. We're handicapping our own children with that. And also, I'm not making this for the men's movement. I'm not making this for feminism, how it helps or hurts people. I'm not making this to change the court system. I'm not doing this for a cause. I'm doing this for the man that will listen to it and find out that he has an option in these very tough times. And see, what we're going to talk about in this series is how to be a great man, a great father at high points of adversity. And see, we need to do what is best for us, what is best for our family at points when we have the most adversity possible. You know, and most likely something like a divorce or false child abuse claims, they're going to rock you. They're going to come pretty close to destroying you. And when we think about it, this is what we signed up for. This is fatherhood. Of course, it's not the ideal situation. Of course, we wanted to have a strong foundation and a strong relationship, but it is at this time that we need to do what is best and most important for that one thing, and that is our kids. how you handle this situation, how you handle it legally, how you handle it with your ex or soon-to-be ex, or if you're going to save your marriage, your wife, how you handle that is going to determine your kids' behavior, thoughts, emotions for the rest of their lives. So I want to start this off and talk about trauma. We're going to have some other videos in the series which detailedly break down the legal process in this, because it's kind of crazy, and that's one of the most important things in it all. If this is your first video that you're watching, make sure and check out those other videos, and if they're not released yet, well, get ready for them. So trauma is important because this is a huge part of the beginning stage of going through a divorce and custody battle, especially when you're being accused of false charges. And now those false accusations usually have to do with abuse, they have to do with domestic violence, they have to do with drug use, they have to do with mental illness. And one of the things that we find with a lot of the different clients is sometimes they have a mix of them. So they've had domestic violence charges before, or the cops have been called and an investigation has taken place. They might have had a child abuse claim like my own that you were charged with and went to a whole criminal process with, and now it was being used against you. What's real common and really sad is when guys have mental illness, and we're going to touch upon this a little bit here, and that is used against them in the court system to show that they're bad parents. It's almost as if a woman and her legal team thinks it's a slam dunk to basically say, oh my God, he's borderline or bipolar or has these different qualities that he's diagnosed with, and uses that against him so that he can't see his kids because she's trying to cover up something about her life. And see, what's important in this is, remember when I said the uncommon part of my story is I didn't react to those things, and that's really important to understand. If I were to have reacted in that way, if I were to have retaliated and done some of the things that guys do, which is attack her or follow her or stalk her or make threats against her or send a bunch of text messages, it would have really added a lot of adversity to my case. I hate to say it, but because of my first case 10 years prior to this one, I knew a little bit more about the courts. I knew a little bit more what to do, and I hired a good lawyer right away. And like I said, in future videos, we're going to in detail discuss that whole legal process, because we did it thoroughly, we did it right, and the result is probably something that you want: full power and control legally over the decisions and choices of what happens to your children. So one of the things that I think is so important about the story of trauma is I've seen a lot of it. So I've struggled with addiction my whole life. If you guys have been watching my videos, you know this. I've been clean for a while. I work professionally in the recovery world. It's something that is a huge part of my life. But from the age of 14 till now, 43, I have been somebody who's been in and out of addiction recovery. But if you're somebody who's going through this very intense process of divorce and custody, and you are suffering from trauma, you absolutely 100% need to find a support group or a psychologist or a therapist of somebody that could help you. So let's talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is something which comes up a lot with addiction. I work with it all the time. I suffer from it. And it's actually a big part of my story in this whole situation. I work with a lot of addicts and a lot of guys who say they've beat PTSD. And I really want to be careful with this. So it's normal for you to have post-traumatic stress, things like memory lapses, you don't know how you got someplace, you're overstressed, you can't manage your emotions, you can't do simple mathematical problems. There's all sorts of different things that come with post-traumatic stress. In a divorce and in a custody battle, this is normal, but in regular society, in normal life, this is abnormal. So we have to get help for it. Now, the difference with post-traumatic stress disorder is that means it exists for a longer period of time. It doesn't follow the natural path of stress. That might mean that it continues after a month or a couple weeks after the incident. And in divorce and custody, it's very normal for this stuff to get drawn out, for better or for worse. And so we have to be able to manage that. I think one of the problems with trauma and PTSD is people want to say they've gotten past it, as they weren't affected by it, that they've conquered it, to say they were strong. And I really got to tell you that this is not the right way to handle PTSD. You got to realize it's a part of you. What you saw, what you experienced, what you did needs to be absorbed within you and transformed. And you'll live a better life that way. It's amazing. That means that if I can properly manage it, that I can properly deal with it, I can turn it into something good. And this is one of the pivotal parts about this entire series I'm doing for men. This is what we have to do. We got a call to a rite of passage and we have to take it. And why do we have to take it? Not so that we can be the best possible man for ourselves, but the best possible man for our kids who can live a good life and not be affected by the crazy stuff that their parents are doing when they're breaking up. I want to be really clear with this. If you do not manage the emotions and the mental issues that come up in divorce and custody when you're under massive amounts of stress, if you do not manage those very normal things in divorce, but abnormal in, real relaxed life, you will completely destroy and sabotage your case. You have to get it under control. And so how do we get that under control? Well, I want to tell you a little bit more about my story in this because one, my story in this whole situation is common. It happens to a lot of men. But again, what I did and how I handled the situation in terms of mental health, in terms of emotion, in terms of getting my team around me, as well as organizing and orchestrating a legal team in tandem of that, is abnormal, and that's really what you want to hear. So as I said, I'm an addict. I've been in and out of recovery for a long time. When I was 30, I got clean and really made a lot of changes in my life. But in that story of addiction, before I was 30, basically from 14 to 30, I saw some pretty horrific stuff. My story has to do with a lot of violence, a lot of brutality, a lot of abuse, sexual assault, torture, abduction, kidnappings, you name it, stuff that is just really bad. And for better or worse, that's the reality that I dealt with. So when I was 18 years old, my first girlfriend, or the girl that I was first sexually involved with, she was kidnapped, and I witnessed a part of that, and it was really horrible, and she was tortured and all sorts of crazy stuff. And that basically set a foundation of certain thoughts within my mind. Now in that situation, she was assaulted in all the ways that you could imagine. It was truly tragic for us. I got a ton of STDs, she got a ton of STDs from it. And the people are never caught. And that's really tough, when you're 18 years old, you don't really know what to do. And thank God at the time I was actually in recovery and clean for some amount of time at that time. And so that put a new standard of hatred, of revenge, of trauma, of triggers that were within me in that moment. Now, as my ex and I were breaking up, some of the things that she did to sabotage our relationship that actually play a huge part in our whole legal battle, which gave me a huge ton of leverage, was she did some things that triggered that very thing. So when we split up, I was over 10 years clean. I had been coaching men for 10 plus years. I had seen these patterns work before. I was actually working in rehabs and working with guys who had PTSD. And 20 years, more than 20 years after that event happened, I was having flashbacks, nightmares, and basically every time I would shut my eyes, I would see my ex being abducted, being tortured, being sexually assaulted, begging for help, me trying to save her, not being able to do these things. And these were things that were a part of my reality that I lived when I was 18 years old. Man, that was 20 plus years. Actually, almost 23 years to the day. So when I started to have the PTSD come back, I actually didn't notice it. I just knew I couldn't sleep and I was going crazy and out of my mind, but in somewhat of a denial about this. And it wasn't like a logical thing, it's just how it works. And again, it's so weird because I'm so familiar and working with people on this. So thankfully, I was in the recovery community, and thankfully I had tons of therapists and people around me at my beck and call to be able to work with me. Thankfully, I had a great group of men around me. But I remember when I went to my ex, because we hadn't broken up yet, she hadn't completely dismantled the whole thing, I said, man, I'm having stuff come back from my past. I'm having stuff come back from my abduction, and it has to do with the situation that we're in and these things. And she dismissed it. She said I was crazy. In fact, she said I was weak and weak-minded. And I bring this up not to make her look bad. I bring this up because it's common. It's not common because women are bad. It's common because when women or men don't know what to do in a situation where their back is against the wall, they do some crazy stuff. And part of this is a message for people that perhaps when you're in this situation, don't do these things. Don't make false abuse claims about your husband or wife or whatever just so that you can win or get leverage. Don't dismiss things things like mental illness, things like PTSD, things like addiction. Do not dismiss that, and don't use that against somebody in some sort of malicious way. And so, yeah, you know, she dismissed it. She did what a lot of people do, thinking is the right thing, holding on to their lie, their part in the situation, so that they could follow their plan of whatever's going to work in some weird way while they're trying to organize the chaos in their own head. So I bring this up because it was important. I mean, I'm somebody who has a lot of resources and a lot of access, but it was hard to stay clean during that. It was hard to, for lack of a better term, not kill myself during that. And I know that sounds harsh, but when you can't sleep and every time you shut your eyes, you see the woman that you love be tortured and gang raped and harmed while you're trying to save her, and that is your reality every moment of the day when you just close your eyes, you want it to stop. You want to get high. You want to kill yourself. And I want to tell you guys these things because what I did is very, very important, and I took it seriously. I started going to therapy. I started going to support groups immediately, and I started to be around people 100% of the time. I almost can't believe I did all of this, and really I didn't. It was the community of people around me that helped me out because they knew what I was going through. But I had people around me watching me when I was with my kids. I had people making sure I was safe. I had people making sure that I was in a good place, doing the right thing to pass through this moment. And this is vitally important for guys who are going through this situation. You know, I say that there's three things that are super important when you're going through a divorce and custody battle. And number one is that you have the therapeutic mental health help. That's a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, social worker, you name it. Number two is you also need a men's group, and that's super important. And that is what saved me. My group of recovery, as well as my men's group, was the thing which kept the even keel in this situation. I didn't have just the yes men of my family and my friends. I had people who had been there and done that and looked out for my best interest. The third thing, of course, is the legal help, and that is super important. And we're going to talk about that in some upcoming videos. But what you need to understand about the whole legal process is, yes, I get it. Divorce is a business. I get all these comments of people talking about how you don't need a lawyer and you can do it on your own. If you can do it on your own, by all means, do it on your own. But you need the skill to determine whether or not you need a lawyer. You need to understand what that means, because if you need a lawyer, you have to get one. Then how do you get one? How do you afford one? How is it that you need to manage that lawyer? How is it that you might need to fire that lawyer and get a new one? How do you know if it's the right lawyer? There's a huge part to this process that for a guy that just doesn't know and he hears somebody say you don't need a lawyer, you can do it yourself. Man, that's some of the worst advice out there. It's not the worst advice because it's always wrong. Sometimes it's right. But when it is wrong, it's tragically wrong. Because if you do not learn the skill to determine whether or not you need a lawyer, and you need one, and you listen to somebody telling you you don't, man, you screw everything up. And in this situation of what I'm talking to you right now about PTSD and trauma and these common things that come up for men in this situation, if you do not get that emotional part under wraps, you're gonna do things that are gonna screw everything up. You're gonna send text messages, you're gonna talk to her, you're gonna say weird things to your kids, you're gonna put yourself in odd situations. If you have a drinking or alcohol problem, you're going to probably be drunk or inebriated around your children or in a situation where you're gonna embarrass yourself. You are going to sabotage your case in so many ways. You have to get the right help. And so in my situation, I had to act fast. There were some pretty heavy claims against me. Somebody was attacking me. I didn't know what their next move was going to be. I already had the situation from the past where I was accused of abusing my kids and charged with it. I knew how much that damaged my kids. I knew that that meant I didn't get to see those kids for 5 years. I didn't want that to happen to my younger children. And they were already having the trauma that they had for the breakup and all these different things. And if you think that doesn't affect children, man, it massively, massively affects children. You need to understand what that means. It doesn't mean that you can't break up and you need to hold on to a relationship that is bad for you, but man, like it causes some heavy, heavy damage. And in fact, that's one of the angles of how I could have gotten custody. It wasn't one of the lower level ones, but you'll hear about it more in the legal case. But I can't encourage you enough that number one, if you're going through this problem, I understand trauma. I understand what it means to not be able to think. I understand the pains that you have. I understand that the guilt that you have in this situation, and you have to get it under wraps. You have to get with a group. You can get to a point where you can integrate it all. You can get to a point where you can become a great man, and if there's anything, I am proof of that, but more so, there's proof of hundreds of guys in my groups that do that. If something like my groups like Men's Development Excellence is not something that you want to be a part of, please go to a support group. There's ones that are free, there's ones that are paid. Get the money to get a therapist. I think that if you are going through this stressful time, that is one of the most important things that you can do to manage yourself. Part of the process of being a great man is not taking this hate and this pain and this sadness and this blame and this guilt that you feel over your family being dissolved or disappearing in front of you. It isn't that we deny that. It isn't that we overpower it. It isn't that we stomp it down. It's that we become it. We integrate it within ourselves and begin that amazing journey of masculinity that I share with all of you as much as I can, 7 days a week in my groups like Men's Development Excellence, that we can become better men from it. And it is a process. And this is what I'm sharing with you guys. I am sharing my journey of how I changed and transformed that. Because for the third time in my life, this time that I'm talking to you about right now that started years ago, was the third time in my life where I had to answer the call, the rite of passage of going into the darkness, to look at the pain and to find the deeper sides of myself to evolve to a better man. And why did we want to become a better man? Why is that important for me? Why is that important for you? It's because of your kids. It's because of fatherhood. And it's because that is the most important thing in your life. And if there's anything that you're going to do to change the world, it's going to start there. And so that, gentlemen, that's where we have to walk. That's where I walk with you. That's where we change. That's where we evolve. And that's where we're going. In the next couple videos, we're going to talk about the specifics of my court case and how I went from in 8 weeks being accused of abusing and harming my children, causing harm to my family falsely, and how that was thought out, plotted against me, used with intention to ruin my life. I was able to reverse that. Not only clear my name of all abuse claims, but I had the opportunity to get full custody of my kids, to put a protective order against my ex, and to also press charges against her, which gave me complete legal and absolute control of my role with my children so I could be a great father. Stay tuned for that one.